Today we are meeting on a panel about PolicyLAB. This is the emerging innovation that is going all around the world, as you will see in a moment. And basically the one question and objective that we have today for this panel is what can we learn from them, the PolicyLAB people, we as the community of evaluators, and maybe in a discussion they could also learn something from us. So that let's hope that would be the case. Let me briefly introduce our wonderful discussants, panelists. Paulina Sudra from InnoLab, Poland, Polish Agency of Enterprise Development. Anna Wicher, Design Policy PDR, Wales, United Kingdom. Thijs van Exel, Kinesland Researchers, the Netherlands. And last but not least, Jan Hnewkowski, GovLab, Czechia or Czech Republic? Have you changed the name of your country? Czech Republic. You are sticking to the old one. Okay, the plan for the presentation, the plan for the panel is as follows. I will have a brief presentation, 15 minutes, maximum 20 minutes about PolicyLABs, who they are, what they do, and certain advantages and limitations. And then we have a discussions with our panelists. I have some questions to them. They will be answering the questions, arguing, and then the floor is yours, the audience, and we will have plenty of time for question and answer from the audience. So moving to the big picture, just to introduce you to the PolicyLABs, here is the plan for our presentations, who they are, what labs do and how, and the last thing, what are the advantages and limitations. But just to start with the evidence base for this presentation, this is basically a summary of the article, the research that we've done for the last 3 years with my great colleagues Sylwia Borkowska-Waszak from University of Strathclyde, Anna Domaracka-Widła from University of Warsaw, and Yarin Park from George Washington University. We've been reviewing top leading labs around the world, and we try to find some patterns. The whole article has been already published online, so you can refer to this, and that will be basically the summary. Here is the map of the labs that we've been reviewing and looking closer at them. This is a case-based approach, so we basically targeted 20 positive outliers. These were back then the top labs that were most developed. In the article, you have the more detailed description, what kind of criteria we used to target them. Some of them, they do not already exist, so that's then interesting. Probably in the discussion we'll have something about the sustainability of the labs, but that's for now. That's just the map all around the world, and they are from different continents, different cultural contexts. Moving to who labs are, the findings of our research. Basically, if I could summarize it in a really brief few words, these are the shared spaces of collaboration. You bring different people, different stakeholders into place that it's where you can experiment with ideas, with design, with services, with social impact stuff. And it's a forum for open discussions, so you are not you don't worry if it can be mainstream. That's the worry for later on. We're just brainstorming and trying to be as creative as possible. And what we find out, there are major free forms of those labs. They could be entirely public, owned by the public sector, and these are like internal agile teams of the civil servants who are coming together and trying to do something together. Sometimes they contract out studies, but usually they do it inside a ministry. Then the second type of the group, these are the NGOs. And then the third one are non-profit inter-organizational partnerships. I will give you the example in a moment. So different partners from the particular region are coming together and trying to do something. They can operate on local, regional, or even national scale. We excluded from our study international labs because these are usually the platforms for promoting the idea of social innovation or experimentation. So we just really focus on those guys who are doing something in reality very often in a local scale. Examples of this, that's one of the labs from Australia. Look what kind of guys has been brought together. Auckland Council, Police New Zealand, Ministry of Health. So these are the representatives from different ministries coming together in this lab and trying to use the design thinking processes to make more creative services in the different sectors or departments. So this is give you some kind of idea how they could operate entirely public, but guys coming from different sectors. Here's another example. It's Philadelphia PolicyLAB. These guys are really unique. This is the university-based thing. And university approached the city of Philadelphia, and they said, brings us your problems, and our researchers from different departments will try to solve it together with the students, and we will experiment. They're doing lots of stuff on behavioral science, so that's a very specific one. But still the idea that you can engage your local university with the civil servants and try to solve the local challenges, that seems very tempting. So this is who they are. And now what labs do and how, that's the tricky thing, because that makes the big difference between us and them. Us, I mean evaluation community. So what they do, they don't do policy. Most of them, they do pilot projects on redesigning services or doing some process improvements in existing procedures and governmental activities. They're also very often engaged in promoting innovative design tools and using these brainstorming techniques and design-led approaches to the services, public services. And they're trying to share it with different stakeholders, local or regional one. They're covering a variety of topics, and you will hear in a moment stories from very different sectors. But the common denominator is that all of them are trying to do something that is visible from the perspective of the citizens. So you can really sell it later on. It's worth of the local media attention, at least. And now the three things that we find out that are so different about how they do the things. The first one is they really focus on final users. And this is very similar to the previous panel, that they are really trying to understand the behaviors of the average citizen, of the guys who would be using the services or engaging into the relations with the particular government entity that is providing services. The second unusual thing that they're doing, and probably Anna would be telling more about this, they are co-designing with stakeholders. So they're really engaging different guys into thinking about the solution. And the last but not least, they are doing social research, but this is combined with the industrial design. It's basically this thinking that try something, then break something, then redesign something, try it again with your users, and go through the number of interactive processes that are developing different types of prototypes, and you ending up with certain version of it, which is the version 100.0 or 2.0. So number of these interactions, they could be like really long. But that's very, very unusual that you are trying things, inventing, trying things, going back to your lab and redesigning things. So that's what they do. When we were looking how they're doing this exactly and what kind of different models they have, during the previous panel, we've seen the different models that are using to analyze behaviors. We find kind of a generic pattern among labs who are behavioral oriented and among those labs who are more design thinking oriented. They're basically trying to bounce between those dimensions. On the one hand, you have the messy reality. Then on the other hand, you have more theoretical approach, or you're trying to make sense out of reality, identifying certain patterns of behaviors, etc. On the one hand, you are doing the things, which is an action. And then on the other hand, you are having a more research-oriented inquiry, trying to research things, explore things. So they are jumping between those realities all the time in a very interactive process. And I will show you on one of the examples of the smaller labs and the example what they done. The example is very simple. It's been popping up here and there already about dealing with papers and correspondence with our citizens. So redefining policy issue. They are starting with looking at, and this will be the DC lab that I'm familiar with example. So redefining policy issue in behavioral terms, like who is behaving or who is misbehaving, who, when, and how misbehave, so the behavior that we don't like or we want to change, and then we are fantasizing what would be the positive behavior that ultimately we want or expect from our citizens. In this case, that was a TANF program. TANF stands for Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. So basically, families that are getting into financial trouble, so single moms or single dads, they're eligible for up to 60 months, but once in a lifetime support from the DC government. But you have to give a chance to the government, and you have to basically apply. And you have to apply, I think, every few years. So if you, every few months, so if you do not reapply, then you are out of the program, and that was your once-in-a-lifetime experience, and you cannot come back. So basically, a lot depends on if you are able to, you are eligible, and you are able to apply or reapply for this project. Just reach out for this money. So that was the desired expected behavior. Families eligible and already covered by this program will be able to renew the benefits. So that's the starting point. Then they usually, these policy labs, they go and explore the program. They really follow their users. They really do the ethnographic studies, try to understand how these people behave and where are the problems. And once they do it, they analyze it like the designers do it. What is the journey of my client, of my users, and what are the pain points where they are experiencing barriers or falling out of our ideal path. In this example, the guys could really fall out on 3 different steps. They could forget about the deadline for renewing the benefits. They could forget about something, some of the required documents. So they come to the government office, but without all the papers required. And the last thing, they couldn't get to the office at all. They didn't even know how to start their journey to the office. So these guys from the DC lab, they identified that these are the 3 major points of pains and how we can help them. And for this, they went into creating a solution, and they organized with their citizens Formapalooza. That's one of the, Palooza is the, you know, that's one of the American festivals, music festivals, that is pretty cool and everybody excited. So lady has a nice hat, and they've been brainstorming about the different ways of improving those letters. And apart from this, they also have the behavioral scientists in this case, who are really looking, just like in the previous panel we've seen, looking at the different ways of improving this particular letter. And they end up with the following thing. They moved for the testing solution, so checking it in the reality. They done randomized control trials, and this is how the letter looks like. So they help you to set the date, and they show you what's the deadline for you. Then get your document together, and you have a simple checklist what things you have to pack for your office and visit in a government office. And then finally, they help you to plan your travel. Are you going by metro, bus, walk or drive? That could be also the barrier, physical barrier to actually complete the process. And what is important, they tested as a randomized control trial, so they have a really strong evidence that 30% more TANF customers kept their benefits with this version of the letter than with the traditional version of the letter. So that's one of the examples how labs are doing this. Not all of the policy labs are doing behavioral insight or experiments, but all of them are thinking in terms of client and in terms of my final users, and making it very empathetic in thinking about who actually we are helping or trying to help. With the testing, I will later on be testing our panelists. How do they test their ideas? Because that's the interesting thing. We know that not a lot, or basically few only labs are using experiments and randomized control trials to test their exciting ideas. But that's a discussion for later on. So that's the generic process. And now the last bubble from my presentation, advantages and limitations. If you look broadly of the activities of these labs, we find some advantages and weaknesses from the evaluation perspective, from our community perspective. The first advantage is that they focus on users and their experience, especially behaviors, which makes things really so, well, makes things complicated, but it's so nicely tangible and understandable to communicate with the politicians and with your citizens. You are not talking about the processes and procedures and abstract things. You are talking about how we can help particular group of humans, our citizens, and in what we can help them with. So that's really, that's its great selling point, and that makes the research also much more intense and focused and interesting. The second part, the second great advantage we see in this approach, it's a safe space for co-design and joint experimentations. That's, if you fail, that's okay. With structural funds, you cannot fail. You have to spend the money, and if we spend the money, that's already success. But if it doesn't work, that's our sweet secret, and nobody should know about it. And here, you can really experiment and push the boundaries. And the last thing, in terms of comparing them to us, I think they have a better timing of the results. They're really coming before the things happen in the policy cycle, when still civil servants and politicians are still brainstorming about different solutions. So this is a perfect timing when you can come up with your little innovation and show that this could maybe work better than our traditional approach. Well, but there are also some limitations that we see. So the most surprising things, majority of those labs, they don't do neither policy nor lab. In terms of, they are not dealing with policy issues, they are dealing with projects and small, sometimes programs, but mainly project level stuff. So this is not a policy as we understand it. And they're not doing the laboratory work in terms of doing the randomized trial experiments. Only a few of them are doing this, so that's not very typical for them. This testing is relatively weak if you think in terms of lab metaphor. That's not a great testing for the pure labs. The second thing, we really have problems with finding this, how they transfer ideas from the lab to the mainstream practice. And does it really happen? Or it's just a lot of great ideas and they never find their way to the mainstream policy practice. And the last thing that we figure out, that's the question about sustainability. Some of them are already disappeared. The leaders that we've been looking and interviewing with, they're not there. Maybe that's the part of the innovation laboratory, that you have a very short life cycle. You solve the problem, you experiment with things, and then you dissolve and you go back to your ministries. Maybe that's the part of who they are. But maybe they should be some, maybe there are some problems with sustainability of those exciting activities, and can you turn them into the more institutionally oriented structures. So these are the main points for the presentations. And now let's us move to our panelists. And the first thing, the first task, that's not even a question. The first task is each panelist could introduce himself or herself and its lab, because it's really interesting who they are and if they fit this picture at all, or maybe they are so unique they don't even fit this typology that we developed. So let's start from Jan.
Okay, thank you, Karol, for introductory presentation. I hope some of you in the audience already know what LAB is about. Based on the presentation, we are not a PolicyLAB because we are a company. We are a private company, and how did it all start? We worked, like I say we started with a colleague of mine. And we used to work for government. We were evaluators of EU funds, as I believe many of you are in here. But the dynamics of the public sector was, I'll say it honestly, too slow. And I really feel like we need to change something. So we decided we would like to help the public administration from outside. And we started up with our GovLab. That's the name of the company. And even though we are not a PolicyLAB, I believe we do things that are kind of similar to PolicyLAB. I'll use one metaphor. Do you know, I have a really recent passion, which is trees and how forests as an ecosystem function. Do you know that trees actually communicate with each other? Have you heard of this Wood Wide Web? Yeah. So for me, this is the best metaphor which describes what we're trying to do. You know, there are these trees, and they don't communicate with each other. And it's like so often in the Czech, at least in the Czech public administration, that the people, like the central government, really works on the, I call it, institutional level. You know, that you hear a politician, he says, you know, there is a problem, and he says, you know, we are already in the middle of preparing new legislation and so on. But they are so far, and they really don't go down to, let's say, the ground zero, where is the service design level, where the services are actually provided. And I believe that we work as a mushroom, because it's actually a mushroom that is transferring the information from the trees. So we work like in this whole system ecosystem, and we are trying to you know, get the right people together and connect this institutional side of central government, regional government, to really like the people, which is actually all about. And one last remark, so that I say what we do. We do evaluation. We still do some randomized control trials, but like really that we on the projects are only like evaluators. And then we have like service design projects. This is how I call them. I have to say, we are quite at the beginning of those, especially two projects we have, which are in social protection, children's social protection area. And then we lecture strategic management, through which we try to change how the public administration itself operates. I pass the word.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks for the invitation. My name is Tess van Exel. The I sound is a bit odd for non-Dutch speakers, but it's Tess and not anything else. Give it a try at least. Thanks for the invitation. Needless to say that this is a great place to be, and including the Christmas markets already referred to earlier. Kennisland. Kennisland is I'd like to refer to it not as a policy lab per se, but more as a think and a do tank. So we do a lot of research, also commissioned work. We're an NGO, and we work a lot like a consultancy firm would work. We don't have any structural subsidies. We get commissioned by oftentimes state authorities, governments to do work and to unravel these complex challenges that they are all working with. And by unravel, I mean we try to develop new ways, new methods, new techniques to try to understand these challenges better and to try to find new ways out of there. And I mean, I have to say humbly that we're not often very successful. We never really create any solutions. But that's also not what we're aiming for. We're not aiming to solve these challenges, because we're deeply rooted in the belief that these complex challenges are not something you can just go about and solve. They're there, they will be there, they've always been there. Stuff like poverty, you want to eradicate it. Everybody wants to do it, but there's no real solution to it. And as referred to in the previous panel, something like poverty, once you try a solution somewhere and it might work, it will not work in the other place. You cannot really blueprint these things. So that's not what we're aiming at. What we're aiming at Kennisland is try to, around a couple of themes, try to develop new processes, new methods to understand and work with these complex challenges better. That's basically what we're doing.
Thank you. Yes.
Great, hello. At the risk of disappointing you, I'm also not from a policy lab. So I'm from a design and research centre, which is called PDR, but we do a lot of work to support policy labs. And we've done that at multiple levels of governance. We've established a policy lab within, for example, the European Central Bank, at national level in the UK. So, for example, doing some work with our UK tax office, which is called HMRC. At a regional level, working with the Welsh Government to establish an innovation lab, and also at local level, so establishing labs within city councils as well. As well as supporting organisations to start policy labs, we help them to, for example, define what their offer is for colleagues within their wider department. We build capacity, particularly around design methods. So supporting government to harness the power of design, and as you heard in the previous panel, to really understand what users require. We also do interventions around policy specifically. So I've recently done a project with the Department for Health, looking at the reform of adult social care. And then we also do evaluation, so supporting labs to move to the next level. So once you've sort of had your setup, once you've maybe had a couple of years to embed, what are the mechanisms within these government labs which are stopping them from moving to that next level and upscaling and building wider capacity and gaining that wider recognition. I think I'll stop there.
Hello, my name is Paulina Sudra, and I think that I represent kind of policy lab, or at least that we touch policy or have some influence, good influence on the policy. Yeah, we were established 3 years ago, and it is within the quite important institution for Polish entrepreneurs, because I also represent Polish Agency for Enterprise Development. Simply speaking, we are responsible for distribution of EU funds for introducing innovation in small and medium-sized enterprises. And I represent the department responsible for evaluation and research. And it is important to know it because this reflection about behave differently, change something in the institution, it appeared in my department, not in other departments responsible for supporting schemes. Maybe it is quite normal because we are responsible for evaluations, for these reflections, what we do and is it worth for companies. But actually, if we found out that we want to do something differently, it has influenced not only my department but the others. And so one thing how it happened really, and it came from very simple observation because we were working like in 7-year periods. We are mostly dependent on EU funds. So our observation from the last perspective was that we introduced many different support schemes, but we are obliged to do them for these 7 years. And after 4 or 5 years, it turned out that some of these schemes are maybe not very suitable. So we had the possibility to change them slightly, but we weren't able to introduce some new support schemes very easily because the whole program with the acceptance of the European Commission should appear. So this observation was that we don't want to allow this to keep this situation on for the new programming period. And we wanted to introduce a pilot project which would allow us to introduce short program schemes for companies. And it came from that, really.
Thank you. Paulina and Jan, they already touched upon that, but just to clarify, each of you, how did you start at your PolicyLAB? What was the year, and what was how the process looked like? Did you, Jan rebelled from the public sector, as I understand, because he got tired, but can you give the timeline and what was the decision and the financing maybe, or the idea?
Okay, so we started GovLab a year and a half ago, and the process was really quite simple. We just decided we want to do it, and we started up the company. I'm really fortunate that my colleague is much more brave than I am, and courageous and innovative. So he, pushed to do it. And the financing, there wasn't really any, because we are really, we are not funded by anyone. We need to earn our money. We work like a company. So that's it.
Okay, thanks.
So it was, I think, 1998 when 3 political science graduates from Amsterdam looked around them in the Netherlands and said, the political and economical focus on the Netherlands becoming more of a distribution nation, focusing on creating great infrastructure to distribute and store goods, is wrong, and we should change that. So those 3 guys just coming from college basically said we need to change that and start something new and start a counter movement. And that's where Kennisland comes from. Kennisland translates to knowledge land. So instead of becoming a distribution land, they wanted to create a knowledge land based on a knowledge-based economy. What knowledge is, well, has gone through many phases, and now, like 20 years later, almost exactly 20 years later, we, I think, arrived at a notion that I feel very at home with. Is the idea that knowledge is not something from experts only, or not something that lives in companies or in, well, the well-educated heads, if you will, but it's also something that is sort of to be had in society in general. People being affected by policies and services are the ones who are knowledgeable about these topics, how things might be better, how things might get to better outcomes for them. And I think that was a lot of the stuff that was happening in the previous panel in this room about behavioral insights. And it's also something that I feel really at home with at Kennisland.
So PDR, our Design and Research Centre, is more than 20 years old. And when we started, we used to have government contracts to help businesses to use design strategically. And that was very successful. We supported more than 6,000 businesses across Wales. And then we started to engage with the government itself and to say, well, did you realise that some of these innovation support schemes you're using with these companies are very difficult for these companies to actually access? And have you thought about taking the medicine yourself and applying these processes to innovate the services that you're offering to small companies? And so we did a process with the Welsh Government to actually make their support services more user-friendly. And then we were getting requests from governments across the UK and around Europe to introduce design to their processes, introduce design at policy level, at service level, at programme level. And then we started to support these labs to use design methods. And we kind of have a 4-stage approach for establishing policy labs. So what is the proposition that they're offering to colleagues? What are the selection criteria for projects? Not necessarily every project is the right one for a policy lab. You should be not necessarily going for the low-hanging fruits, but looking at more strategic initiatives. People skills. Do people have the right skills as part of these multidisciplinary innovation teams? And then processes. What processes are you putting in place to support the organisation to deliver design-related innovation?
So we are entirely public, and our project is financed from EU funds. And the one important thing is that in PolicyLAB we are doing this in a partnership with the Ministry of Development. And at the beginning, we thought that it's not very good to have the ministry, these big institutions with procedures in this project. But after 3 years, we see that it's very helpful, and they are really open-minded people. And it's good that we have such partner and sometimes take care of us. And what's more, and what I want to add about this this project, because this is a very complex one. It has like 3 pillars, and of course the most important and the most innovative one is this design tools which we use. And from the beginning, we had to develop the division responsible for designing, and it was completely new for us. But also there are 2 other very important pillars for us. This is the animation, because we provide networking and education services. And we had an experience in that, so it was a bit easier to develop new ideas. And the third one is social research. So we were quite experienced in this area, and we wanted to develop it in a smarter way in PolicyLAB. So this is really complex, but I think that it is a bit successful because we already had this experience in animation and research, and we add a new thing, which was designing.
Labs are about bringing creativity into bureaucratic environment and thinking out of the box. So my question to our panelists is, what is the most innovative, out of the box, or I can even say crazy thing that you've done in your lab? Example of projects or innovation that you've done and you think it's really out of the box.
So I think that for the first one, I saw this double diamond shape design method. I was shocked, and it was so unusual to use this in our thinking, because in general, we work individually, looking for some papers, checking what others before us did, and trying to write new documents based on this. So when we decided about this double diamond method, I also thought that I had to show it to my CEOs, because they had to know why it takes time. Of course, it is not. It doesn't take so much time if I compare it to our standard procedures. But for them, when I mentioned that we need like 4 months to develop something, and still we will have to write documents after that, so the whole process will take 8 or even 9 months, they were shocked. So I really knew that I had to explain this method. And I remember my president that, these people are for making decisions, not to listen the methodology, what people really do. And she listened to this in a complete silence. And then, well, I should mention this because it was our first designing process, and we wanted to help SMEs in designing in general, that they should look on their products or services, that they should better design them. That it's not only we have to design, but also the companies. And she listened to this, and then she said, "Okay, you must repeat this." The whole process. And I said, why? Because this is the too broad approach you did, that you wanted to help all companies. You must concentrate on one branch. And I would like you to choose furniture. okay. And I said, so yes, but we now need again 4 months to do it. Yes, you will do it. So after that, I really knew that she is convinced to that she agreed that we can work on in that way. Yeah. So this is the one example. And I want to add one thing, because it was really shocking for us when we started to work with owners of companies. Because in agency, as I mentioned, is responsible for distribution of EU funds. So in general, we look at at companies that some of them they apply for EU funds, and there's one group applying for our funds, and the other group is not interested in public money. But when we invited companies to talk to us, not just consulting our ideas, but really to develop the ideas, and I should here mention this furniture branch, that we invited companies from this branch, and the first question was, why do you want to give us money? And they really didn't know about our existence. And for us, it was shock that we are not known. But the second thing was that we were not aware that some companies don't perceive public institutions that are responsible for them. We feel the responsibility for the development of SME sector, and these companies, these owners, they told, why do you want to give us money? This is my business, and I want what I want to do in my company, and if it's worth for business, I will put this money. I don't need public money. So we also had to convince them that we will give them kind of added value in the project, that it is worth to work with us. And this was really completely new group for us, and it started to be exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna?
Well, what I've learned about government is they always think they want innovation, and then when you give them innovation, they don't want it. So I'll give you an example of sort of 3 initiatives. So one of my big bugbears is with public consultation. Governments think that if they develop a new online platform, that all citizens will respond to all public consultation processes. And actually, government needs to be much more proactive in going out to engage the public. So I did a really exciting project on rethinking public consultation. And we did a series of co-creation workshops with the public and asked them, well, how do you want the government to engage with you? And they came up with some really awesome ideas, from enabling people to do photography competitions on policy areas, to tea and cake mornings, and I think for me, gamification of policy concepts. But one of the best ones was around graffiti. So actually, if you have big provocative graffiti campaigns, it'll drive people to participate in public governance. And I'm still in the process of convincing, and the government was really, the department that I was working with was really excited by this idea. And now they're kind of mulling over, well, what are the risks going to be if we go for a graffiti campaign around public consultation? So I'm still in the process of convincing them for that one. Another one is around gamification. So, for example, if you are looking at a topic around, for example, imagine if you were the Minister for Health for the day. You give people a budget and you enable people to put their money in hospitals or adult social care or other forms of health. And you let them see how difficult it is to allocate funding for policies and services. And that actually has a really good way of kind of raising awareness of the kind of challenges and constraints around policy development. And then one example that I wasn't involved in, but I think is one of the best examples I've seen, is using cake for public consultation. So as an example of creating a new public building in quite a deprived area of the UK. And the government wanted to do a face-to-face public consultation. So they got a big pavilion, and they wanted the citizens to come in and co-create this public building. And they did lots of advertising, sent out flyers, lots of online campaigning for people to come. And on the day, no one turned up. and it was a complete PR disaster. But then they weren't disheartened. So then they did the process again, but this time they said that we'll give you an opportunity to build the public building out of cake. And people, I think, were very intrigued by that. And so in the next stage of the public consultation, there were loads of people that came, and they built this public building literally out of cake. And I think that was a really good way of engaging the public and thinking about public spaces.
Yes, thank you.
I've got nothing as crazy as that, but I'll try to come up with something. Yeah, so I hope that the most crazy thing is yet to come.
Oh, cop-out answer.
But once we ran a lab in a town called Dordrecht, which is in the Netherlands. It's a medium, small, 150,000 people city in the southwest of the Netherlands. And we ran a lab there. It was commissioned by the municipality, and it was about young folks in Dordrecht and who sometimes don't have the opportunity to really partake in society, to really participate. And this was the vision of the government. The government said, hey, if you're not in school or you're not in work, you don't participate, and you're bound to cost us a lot of money. That was their frame. So, and these people, and they said it's like a file of people, over 2,000 young people in that file. They estimated they are just not doing the right things, so not participating well. So we said, okay, let's find these people and talk to them and find what they think is participation. And then we find these folks, and where do you find them? Like in the McDonald's and in cafes, and in not in school, not in work, so any place else. And we found this girl, and we boarded her on our team. So our team was partly youths from Dordrecht, partly civil servants from the municipality, partly professionals from organizations. And this one girl, Rachel, she had been a member of the lab since day one, but she had debts, and she was a mother. She was 17. She was a mother, and she was expecting her second child, and she had a lot of debts. And well, this was a problem for her, but it became really apparent when at this one day, she got this letter from. She was summoned to court. And then it said, like, you have to go to prison. You're not paying your debts. You have a big amount of debts with all these different companies. You have to go to prison. And we said, okay, what do we do? What do you do as a lab? Do you create like special conditions for somebody? Do you sort of collect money to bail her out? Or do you just sort of leave things be the natural way, if you will, and yeah, have things go the natural way, and she goes to prison, and we lose a team member. She also loses part of her youth. And so finally we decided to, as a lab, to collect the money at the different institutions that we work with. Also at Kennisland, we gave some money, and we bailed her out, basically. Not really knowing if we would really support that idea, but we did it, and we were really happy because we kept our team member. She was happy, of course. But also we could use it as a case to learn from. So what do people with debts in Dordrecht, what do they do? How do they go about life? And how do they participate in their own way? And how can we design services around that? So from one thing came the other. We bailed her out of jail. She was still part of the team, and we got to learn and design with her. Wow. So it's pretty crazy, I think. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, this might sound a bit boring. Do you know strategic management? Have you ever seen strategy, how the strategy is written? And is it somehow similar, I believe, or at least in Poland, how is it written in the Czech Republic? So I will very briefly. You make an analysis. That is the first step, takes a long time. You use experts, you use numbers. Never include final users. Your target audience is not included in the strategy, but you make a really long time, really exhaustive analysis. Afterwards, out of the analysis, you create like endless wish list of interventions that you believe should be in the strategic area and should be fulfilled. Then it goes to the, it needs to pass the government, So all the other sectors or all the other ministers are bombarding your document. And after this really exhaustive process, all the guys that are, the strategic units, they're completely devastated and they're done. And oof, the strategy passed. But then you should start to implement the strategy to bring any added value for the area. And that's how it goes in the Czech Republic. And I'm really happy what we did with a team that is right now working on the, and that's even more funny because it's a culture creative strategy, culture creative industry strategy, which is things like art, gaming, animation, movies, and stuff like this. We are in the Czech Republic, we are an industrial country. We produce cars. This is not industry for like most of the politicians and most of the people. So they kind of needed to, create a strategy where they would even allow all the other people to know what they are doing. And they were in the middle of the process, and we told them, guys, if you want the industry to kind of happen, to do something with added value, you just can't do it the old way. You use some kind of what we say agile strategic management, and we tell them, hey, you have to go after, or as soon as possible, go to the field, go to the other actors other agents in the system. And we really, came up with an idea to make like 100 days challenge for them, which we later found out that Nesta is actually, like promoting as a method, as a design method. We didn't know at the time. And we made them like, hey, just go and, find out as much as you can from the field, from the other actors, to really start something. And I'm really happy that one of the most important strategic projects of this whole area is about to born, and it's like creating a design agency in the Czech Republic that would, have the like power and the will to make this very new industry like a new industry and people to realize. So that was nice.
Thank you. This will be a tough one. Evaluation community is especially focused on effects attribution and measurement. We are really crazy about this. Basically, how does the thing works and why? So question to you, how do you test your ideas and how do you know that it works?
Okay. I said before that we have also some evaluation projects. We do some counterfactual impact evaluation, some quasi-experiments. And I've always kind of struggled that, evaluations are great, but they are slow. They're really slow. They're slow and rigorous. And the thing is, the very big difference in this design process is that the evaluation is actually the part of the design of this double diamond scheme. And I have to say that what we do is we do really in the design projects we do not slow and rigorous, but we do quick and dirty, and we try to get the feedback as soon as possible. After every single workshop you have, you try to get a feedback, and you try to test or we will, because we haven't gone to the prototyping period, so that I can't just yet with the designing projects. So I can't tell you what will be, how precisely it will be afterwards evaluated. But it's really like quick, and you let like, I really like this saying that if you invite 5 right people, you will get 85% of what you need to know about the thing, about the service that you are about to redesign. So I don't have better answer than just to quickly meet your user as soon as possible and test it with them.
Thank you, Tess.
Yeah, so frustratingly enough, I don't really have a clear-cut answer as well. I mean, I do feel that evaluation, monitoring, these types of things are a different beast when you talk about complex challenges and experimentation. There was a lot of talk about ex ante, ex post evaluation as timing. But what I kind of think is missing out from the discussion is the ex durante. So when you do things, like you said, you want to create learning cycles while you're at it. You don't want to wait until after. You want to, when you work on a complex challenge, all kinds of unintended side effects may occur. Like I was talking about Rachel, who went to jail, and this not only was a nice thing for her, but it was also a nice learning case for us. These things you cannot really predict happening, but you don't want to miss out on them either. So you want to really, engage with them as they happen, and you want to be able to really monitor these things while you go at it. So we want to sort of, as a central idea, have a lab be a learning space, something that can work with all these unintended things and sort of bring players together and create a change mindset. And how can you really talk about success then, right? I mean, I think a success will be when a policymaker, for example, will be the maverick for different ways of policymaking once he's out of the lab. Sort of that could be a scale, right? So once a policymaker who is involved in your lab sort of scales the idea out of the lab into its own realm of policymaking, and lessons learned from the lab, also about the way you do things, are being used into policy briefs, I think that's success. And that's what a good outcome might look like. But I mean, oftentimes these are really long stretched processes that you don't really get to monitor and evaluate after years after you've left the project, right? So in Dordrecht, the same example, even 2 years after we finished that lab, we can still see the effects occurring. And then it's really hard to say, to attribute these things to your lab. So this is a struggle. And again, I don't have a better answer as well.
Yeah, my major interest is in design for public service and public policy development. And I think very often evaluation has been neglected in that sphere. And I totally agree with the previous speakers that there's a balance between, just do it, just iterate, just do action research, go out and actually test, iterate, improve as you go along, versus gathering all the evidence and doing all the evaluation that's required, but decision-making processes being really long. One thing that I would recommend that policy labs do is that every few years they perform an evaluation, both of their projects, but also the way they run their own governance. Rachel's just nodding right in front of me. So for those of you that were in the previous panel, Rachel was presenting about behavioural insights and behavioural science. And she's from the Northern Ireland Innovation Lab. And a couple of years ago, I did an evaluation with my colleague Piotr, looking at the impact of these policy labs. And I think I would really encourage other labs to do the same, to kind of take that plunge and evaluate, as I said, both the projects, but also the kind of governance and the impact of the lab more broadly, to understand what the lessons have been learnt and how to move beyond some of the challenges that all of these labs inevitably face. Because something else that I find intriguing is that a lot of the big name labs like Mind Lab, like Helsinki Design Lab, thank you, are now closing their doors. So how do we create this resilience for the lab so they can move beyond the mistakes that these other labs have made, and ensure the longevity and the continued impact? So again, if anybody wants to have a discussion about evaluating policy labs, I'd be very interested to talk about that afterwards.
I would agree too on this, that the evaluation in labs look like that we test, prototype, and produce something, and again testing and prototyping, and it is the same what we do. And what I can add, that I feel that it is like a constant monitoring and evaluation, and this is really amazing that we could do this in the lab, because our pilot projects are small, so it is quite easy first to observe our small group of companies, and then to monitor them during implementation of the support scheme. And even sometimes what worries me a bit is that we are introducing small programs, and for sure, if after the test I can say that yes, it will work for a small group, so at least I know this, but I'm not sure if it would work for a larger group of companies. But when after the test I knew that that it wouldn't work for a small group companies, for sure it will not work also as a regular competition. So I think that we really get the constant information from this type of activity, and I could say that is the whole methodology behind that. But for us, what is also important, it is not only that we provide better support schemes for companies, but also that we develop as a learning organization. And what I see as also what I perceive that is also a constant evaluation of our activities as an organization is that my department introduces some new way of thinking, and we are talking to our colleagues from other departments, and really they are working very hard. They have plenty of regular competitions, and they deal day by day with thousands of applications. And when we want to introduce a new scheme for 20 companies, they are saying, what? They really have to put a lot of effort to take care of 20 companies if they have thousands of them. But I see that when we are talking to them and we say that we want them to start this new support scheme with InnoLab, for them it is very difficult to refuse, because they know that they would lose something. And eventually, every scheme we design, we find them the department which agrees to develop the idea.
If I may just add one more remark about evaluation and design. It recently came to my mind that while doing the counterfactual or working on the counterfactual, the thing is that I somehow feel that we, as the group of evaluators, always see that there is a homogeneous intervention that we are trying to evaluate, and then it's done and we evaluate it and we have a look and we try to say what is the impact. But the more I go into the design methods, it's really for me that's not a one homogeneous intervention. There's like so much more in every single service provision, in every single intervention, so many soft things. The context is so important. So I'm like, when I will be writing the final report after counterfactual, it will be like, so what is it actually that brings the positive impact, even if it brings it, because there is so many things that if you just run the counterfactual, you really don't know. And for me, the design methods and the way you communicate with the end user and with the service providers and so on, it brings so much more into the actually evaluation world as well. So it's like there is big complementarity, I would say.
Like the counterfactual, you mean this in traditional evaluation jargon, that is like a black box of basically not the behavioral or experimental stuff that they can really go in depth and they can understand the mechanism to tweak. They tweak. Okay, great, thank you. The question that the issue Tess already touched upon. Your idea work, you have some evidence for this, and now is the hardest part, that you have to transfer it into practice, right? You have to feed it into the reality. You were already saying about this, that's a part of the success, that you can see that it starts working in the reality. So I want to ask you about very practical strategies you use to make, to increase the chances that it will be mainstream, that it will be taken by the policy world from you, the great idea will be taken for you. Do you engage your stakeholders early in the process? How you're trying to play this process?
So I mean, yeah, you're looking for nice practical strategies. I'm not really able to provide them, I think. Although the way we look at the world around us at Kennisland is basically, you could, if I abbreviate it, there's a couple of things to take note of. So one thing is, you have the practical world, like the lived reality of people, like everyday people who go by, live their roles, professionals who do their work, etc. Things can improve there. We do work there. We try to improve these realities and the very practical things. We do that in our work. Not to improve that very contextual thing only, but to learn from it. And that's where the second part comes in. That learning doesn't really happen only with the people in the practice, not only with the professionals that we work with, or the Rachels I talked about, who you bill out of jail, etc. You do these things, and those are very small things, to create a learning environment for people in organizations who create services, but also policymakers who create the policies, to work with you to improve these practices. So to put solutions into practice is not really, I mean, I think that's really a double thing. These solutions are practice. You put them in practice by doing it in practice, and you change reality as you go. And by doing that, that's what we call action research, right? You change something as you go, and by doing these things, you learn from them. These are really like creating, the lab's really creating a learning environment by changing things in reality for the better of people, services, I don't know, like really small things in communities, community houses, etc. You might change things for the better to be able to learn from them as an organization, how you might sustain these practices, but also as a policymaker, how you might create conditions that will sustain these improvements. Am I making myself a little bit clear? I know it's really late. I mean, I'm aware of that. But I mean, I'm trying to make a point. It's a multi-layered thing. It's not about creating things and put them into practice later. It's by doing things in practice.
I think from my experience, there's 3 key things. I think it's crucial to involve senior decision makers throughout the whole process. Very often, you know, they will be responsible for the brief overall, and they'll be responsible for receiving the policy concept at the end. But they won't engage in the project throughout the process. And so when the policy concepts or the new service concepts come out at the end of the process, they don't see how it's related to the challenge, or they don't see what the journey has been. They haven't been involved in the user research. They haven't been involved in the ideas generation session. It's very difficult to involve senior decision makers in these processes, but actually I think it's absolutely crucial, and you need to make sure that they engage at least in doing some of the user research and being part of the ideas generation sessions. I don't know if policy processes are the same across Europe, but in the UK, you have different people who are responsible for implementation. Different people who are responsible for developing policy options, and different people are responsible for programming, and people are responsible for implementation. And very often those people are not involved in the process all at the same time, which is just so crazy, because the people in policy have no accountability for what comes out at the end of the process. They don't monitor to see how their ideas are translated into services. So I think that not only do you need the users right at the front of the process, you also need the implementation bodies and the program bodies at that policy development stage. And then the third lesson, I'd say, is capacity building. So I don't think that policy labs should just be doing the projects for other departments. They need to be actually building a capacity within that other department to make sure that, you know, it's not just about parachuting expertise in and then leaving them to it. They're actually embedding those lessons, and that they can then start to use those tools, whatever innovation method you're using, whether it's design or randomized control trials or behavioral insights. You need to leave capacity within the team that you're doing the project with.
Great, thank you.
So I would say that when I'm thinking about successes of our project, I could say that we had or have still we have kind of a lucky coincidences, but maybe it is because of that we looked at the structure of what we are able to do really within our organization. And our idea was that, as I mentioned, we are quite a big institution, and we organize large competitions for companies. And these pilot projects were unusual. Now they are quite common because InnoLab is very known. But from the beginning, we wanted to introduce pilot projects, and we wanted them to multiply the effects. So the idea was that we have InnoLab with its own budget for small projects, but then we have structural funds, and if the pilot succeeds, it will go as a regular competition. And it really worked from the beginning. And it was maybe it was like a low-hanging fruits, this first competition, because I think that we just jumped in the trend, and I mean here the program acceleration programs for startups in collaboration with large companies. That our first initiative was based on building the network or ecosystem of accelerators in Poland. So I could say that we built them from the beginning, but probably the trend was very observable in other countries, and it just started in Poland because it was just in time. So this is the first thing that we put this in practice. That we think that practice is that we do pilots and then we multiply the effects by introducing it to large programs. And this is not only the acceleration programs which succeeds, but also what we have been doing from the beginning is that we want to promote some ideas. So this pillar of animation that we provide networking and education services is very helpful, because when we introduced this program, acceleration program, we knew that we had to talk to large companies and to startups, but especially large companies, to help them to understand how to work with startups and how to even change the organization of a large company to be prepared for this cooperation. So beside the competition, where we just gave money and some services to these two types of beneficiaries, we introduced an animation program, meetings, breakfasts, even evening meetings for large companies, and it was really a new beneficiary for us, because we mainly introduce programs for small and medium-sized companies, and suddenly there are large companies with these very important CEOs coming to our meetings. But they eventually came, and the general idea really spread out because of these competitions and also animation around this.
Now the last, yes.
Okay, so I will not give you any tips. I will tell you how we are approaching it, but it's the best we know, but I don't know if it will work. So in the project with the children social protection, it's kind of a big project because Czech Republic has 14 counties, and we work like in one county, like the whole country, and all the like children social protection offices are involved in this project. And what we are trying to do, and what we've succeeded in already, that we managed to gather all the people like together that are involved in it somehow. So it's like the regional government, the municipal governments, the very important, at least in the Czech Republic, is this social innovation unit, which is one unit that it's really like trying to get social innovations in the system. And we're also trying to communicate with the guys from the Ministry of Social and Labor that do the policy job. But right now the thing is that it's kind of blocked at the side of the ministry. So the thing is that firstly, and that was emphasized here, it's really important to make the change. Redesign the service at the first place, the services. In the one county. And if it works well, then I think it's quite successful already. But then we believe it will, you know, like if you build strong enough network around the things you do, and you involve like the other important agents, we believe that after it will start to advocate, and we will work on the advocacy level, and then we hope that even the guys that maybe right now are a little bit blocked at the ministry that are responsible for the policy will, you know, take it into consideration. And let's see how it works. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And since we are already in the advice part, the last question to each of you, it has a double part. Let's say that people in the audience are really trying to try to start PolicyLAB formula. So the first thing, what's your advertised pitch? Why it's worth doing a PolicyLAB? Just a short slogan. And then the second part, what I should be especially careful about when I'm starting a PolicyLAB. So, Jan.
I will say it again on an example. We did one evaluation. It was we evaluated a project in the of the Czech Development Agency, like a project in Moldova, and we did the evaluation. We did the evaluation report. We delivered the presentation. Work was done, and I was like, "Is that it? You know, like nothing after." And that's how I sometimes feel about evaluation. And that's what I really appreciate about doing things like a PolicyLAB. It's that I feel it as a continuous process, like endless process of, you know, you're learning as much as you can. I really like this mushroom metaphor that you're trying to get as much inputs inside, as much knowledge inside, as many, you know, people around you as possible. And it's this continuity really, that's very fulfilling. So that's why you should go for it. And one thing that it's, at least for me, what I've learned so far, it's like a key thing. It's really being empathic. Really, and guys, evaluators, academia people, you know, they're really smart sometimes, but they have their own word, and they are not willing to change. And sometimes we, let's face it, evaluators, as the, you know, like the guys that have the knowledge, have the evidence, are not willing to, you know, go down and really say it in an appropriate word. And if you want to do design, and you really want these projects to be meaningful, you have to be able to speak with the director at the ministry, and then speak with a, I don't know, kid at the street, or with an Alzheimer patient and their family living in a countryside, and really operate at the levels of the people you are communicating with.
Thank you, Jan.
So I think, first of all, that once you're staged to sell a lab, then you're a little bit late in the process, and you're talking to the wrong people, probably, because you don't want to sell something that needs desire on the other hand. You know, you need desire on the other hand to to change and to learn. So once you observe there's a real need to change behavior, for instance, in a government, or there's a real need to do things differently on a tough challenge, then you might have a good conversation. But I think what works best for us is to really disguise our projects in sort of, I like the Trojan horse metaphor, sort of really try to find the challenges that speak to you and that are interesting to you. For Kennisland, those are the obvious topics for us. In healthcare, in education, in tough urban challenges. And we try to find the commissioners with these challenges and really try to relate to what they really want to get solved. But then we try to Trojan horse our way into that office and disguise it a little bit. You know, try to really be helpful and empathetic. And then once you're in, you can unload your your method and your ideas and your techniques. You can see how far you can come.
So I would encourage potential PolicyLab owners to think about, why are you doing the PolicyLab? And fundamentally, it's about jointly creating public services and public policies with users and key stakeholders. And as I said right at the beginning, we have a kind of when we establish a PolicyLab, we kind of think about 4 things. So that's proposition, products, people, and projects. So the proposition is, what are you offering to colleagues? Very often, PolicyLabs are really small units, and they have to create credibility in order to get other departments to want to use their services and to innovate with them. So what's the proposition for other colleagues? What are the products you're offering? Are you offering bespoke services every time, or are you offering kind of off-the-shelf, like formula menu of services? Are you providing training to upskill colleagues? Really think about people as well. So very often labs tend to retrain existing civil servants rather than actually hire in experts in behavioral insights or design or randomized control trials. And sometimes that means they're not always, they don't often have the practical experience. So doing a kind of skills analysis of the team. And then process, so which methods you're going to be using as part of projects. What does a typical project journey look like? How are you going to communicate that to prospective clients? Not to use innovation jargon, that kind of thing. So I think those are all the things to consider.
I would add to that what is maybe important for Polish colleagues is that in such a ecosystem you can fail. That we in Poland are very risk averse, and also in administration where we are responsible for public funds, so we are obliged to do the best, our best, and not to fail. And in such type of activity, if you undertake a lot of ideas and you produce them a lot, it is just impossible that all of them will be lucky and successful. So everybody, I think, that understand when they are deeply in project or try to understand the project, that some ideas fail, and it is just normal. And the other thing is that if you can fail, you can also undertake or produce a lot of new ideas, that everything new is very welcome, that in your standard work you just follow the procedures, you know what you have to do today, tomorrow, and so on. And in such type of activity, you are free to find something really extraordinary and try to put it into life.
Thank you to all our panelists. And now the floor is yours. If the audience have any questions, please shoot. Any questions, comments, ways to clarify the things?
I want to ask how you are collaborating with decision makers, and a little bit details about that collaboration.
That's a good question, I think. I could try to answer from my perspective. Well, a thing about collaboration is before you get started with this type of work, I think you need to identify these change makers in this system, right? You have to identify folks inside these governments, inside these systems that might be on your side to be willing to change things. Those might be the ones you want to collaborate with first. This is before any project happens. Those are the folks that are basically on your side. They can pave your way into creating experiments with the government. I'm not sure if that's a good answer to your question. And then collaboration, well.
understanding from the from those who are who will gonna implement your proposals, your ideas. So,
so I think I can clarify a little bit. So I think it relates to what you have said earlier, Anna. Is you want to have these people on board as soon as you start, and you don't want to create something as a sandbox outside that people will hear from later once you're done. You want to onboard them as soon as you get started, and practice and do the things with them instead of for them. So really have them be part of your process, and in that sense, it's collaboration from day one.
So they are kind of lab members also.
For us, that is the case. We try to make them part of the team.
Well, I just briefly add our experience is that you really need to find those guys that want to change it, like really like they're special. But then even the guys that are maybe at the first day, it would be really nice to have them as soon as they find out that you're doing something interesting. And people will tell each other if you come there and if you do just like a typical EU project, which is very, like writing a methodology or whatever, or if you do like creative, playful thing, people will tell each other, hey, this really has something about, and people start to join you. So that's another case in our experience.
I want to add to that when we start cooperating with stakeholders, we also start from the very beginning, that we just have an idea that we are thinking about digitalization in companies, and we are starting exactly from this, that we go to the ministries, to some institutions which are close to public administration, and we talk that we are thinking about the schemes on digitalization, and what do you think about it? Do you want to be in the process? And I observed an added value of such activity, because first they must attend all these meetings. If they don't attend, when the process is finished, sometimes they are very surprised about the results, or they wouldn't be very helpful when the instrument will be introduced, because we will be alone with that. And this added value, what I observed is that sometimes we are interested in one topic, and other institutions too. So they want to involve in the process, but they also want to control what we do. And sometimes it is really difficult because they don't work with us like in a process that we are all equal and are partners, but they know better what to do. But so eventually, what I see that sometimes it really works because, of course, there are overlapping instruments, overlapping schemes for entrepreneurs. So if eventually we agree on one stage that they are interested also in this scheme, so we are trying to divide the tasks. That, for example, now we are working on this scheme on digitalization. So one institution is more interested in trainings for companies, and we are more interested in investments. But we had to started to talk to each other that we do not want to overlap, but we are even complementary with that.
Any other questions? No. So using the user experience, I can say, and being empathetic, I can say it's very late and you are very tired, but you've been very brave, and thank you for being with us. So let's give us a big clap to our members, panels. Thank you, and of course we are here for you if you want to approach us later on and have a chat or follow us with the emails. Please do. Thank you once again for being with us. Thanks, and thank you again.